Okay. All right, so basically, let me just, I'll start sharing my screen too here. Mostly what I want to go over today is this issue right here, which is basically all the end-to-end mock-ups for the mass integration epic that we've been working on. So Patrick's done a great job of trying to put down all the different states that we needed to design for. And with some of the states, I felt like I put them all first within the issue in the design tab. But if I found it, as I did that, I found it kind of hard to get feedback on them, and just it's kind of hard to follow like the flow. So what I ended up doing was I created a prototype for each kind of flow. And what I wanted to do in this call, just go through each flow and just make sure that we're on the same page. I made some iterations on some of the flows in the last week from some of the feedback I've already heard. So that's one thing. I wanted to go through, I think, the flow for the instance level, the group level, and then project level. And then just to take a step back for, I think for Lucas and Mike that haven't been kind of heads deep down into this this issue. So basically what we're doing is we're basically making the feature of service templates better, I guess. And what we're going to be doing is getting rid of service templates, and we're going to be making it so that if you're an admin of an instance, you could set up an integration for Jira, and it will set up for all projects. So the current limitation of service templates is if you set up that service templates for like a Jira configuration, for example, let's say the new projects are created, only the new projects will inherit those settings, not any old projects. And then if a project owner decides to change those settings, they can. So there's no way for a service template to be smart and know that, oh, one of my projects has overridden one of these settings. So there's certain limitations there. So the idea is that we're going to get rid of service templates or deprecate them, and we are going to have this this new way of doing integrations. And we're going to also introduce them not only to the instance level, but also to the group level where we don't have those yet. So any questions before I kind of dive into this? All good? All right. Cool. And then also, if we have a little bit of time, I think I wanted to go over some of we were discussing like on how we were going to actually migrate away from service templates to this new way of doing integrations across the instance level and group level. Anyways, first of all, I'll just dive into the prototypes, and then I'm going to rearrange this issue, by the way, but if you don't all mind, if you want to leave feedback then for the individual flows, I think it'll be better if you just do it within Figma more contextually, instead of, I put a comment here, which I'll delete, which says to kind of put the comments within the design tab. So I'll kind of look at what's in here already, and then I might just scrap those, and then we'll just go with what's in Figma then. And in order to leave comments in Figma, all you have to do is create like a free account and just create it with your GitLab account. This way I'll know who's actually leaving that feedback. All right, so let me start sharing the Figma file. And so what I'll start doing is I will work through what it looks like when settings are being inherited at the project level, and then what it looks like when they're being inherited at the group level, and then what it's like when you're at the instance level to basically create one of these settings, these global settings. So give me one sec. Let me find my Figma file. All right. All right. So at the project level, so let me start this off here. Are you all seeing the Figma screen, by the way? Okay, great. Okay, let's let this load up here. So at the project level, so this is what it would look like if, let's say I'm an owner of this project, and I've created this project called Help Docs, and then I go to the integration, my settings integration, and I see that a Jira configuration is already set up, and I have this banner here saying that it's already managed by an administrator, that I can restore the settings if I need to. And by the way, I just wanted to note that I still wanted, once I kind of have more confidence with some of these flows, then I'll get Russell Tech Writing involved into this, because I know a lot of the copy that you'll see here is a lot just for placement only. So anyway, so you'll see this banner, and then I have the option as this project owner to overwrite some of these settings. So let's say I wanted to use my username and login for, in this case, for my Jira. So I would start editing there, and let's say I just wanted to use Bob, and then I wanted to use, you know, my own password, but I want to keep the URL that the admin's assigned, and then I maybe want to also have merge comments on merge requests happen. So what you'll see happen is that I was hoping that maybe this could happen on focus and as I'm typing. So then the banner would change, and then you would actually see the fields would highlight that are being overridden. And then now I also have this new button here that appears that says restore admin settings. So I could click that, and then all my settings are restored back to whatever the admin's settings were. And again, I would just overwrite that, and let's say I still want to keep those settings. I would just hit save then, and then we should actually use the new toast pattern that's in pajamas. I've noticed that currently all our integrations also use the alert to kind of to show success messages, and we should be using this. So I'm introducing this the toast pattern to show the success messages here. Anyway, so that's project level. Any questions here before I go on? Before I go on up to the group level? All good?
Are there settings that are not overwritable? So let's just say an admin could say, hey, you can't overwrite the username, and then that would look differently?
Yes, yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Lucas. I did forget, I was gonna bring that up, but I don't have that state yet. So basically what I'm kind of envisioning here is a similar state to, let's say, this one here. And I need to add that screen, so I will add this. A similar state to this screen, but with all the fields disabled, and maybe with an extra explanation of why they're disabled here. Or there would be masks. So we have there's an issue that lists all the user stories that we're designing for, and those are all part of the user stories. And then there's another set of user stories that we have for for more future releases once we validate you know, this current setup. And in some of those user stories, we have the extra feature to be able to kind of lock only certain settings versus all the settings, or to be able to mask certain settings on the individual fields level. Yeah, but thanks for bringing that up, Lucas. I will still add that screen. All right, so next is the group level. So now let's imagine that I am an admin for this group. Let's let this load. So I'm an admin of this group called front end group, and then this currently doesn't exist right now within the group level. So I have this new menu item that says integrations, and I will go to my integrations, and I see this like updated layout of the integrations, and I see I have no active ones, and there's my list of all the potential integrations that I could set up. So I'm going to set up Jira for my group, and again, I see this banner that's saying that this feature is new, and that everything that I set up here will apply to everything within that group. Let's see. So, all right, so I'll go ahead and set up my settings, and then I'll also see this table down here that I could see that which projects are potentially overriding these settings at the bottom here. So, no, obviously nothing's overriding yet because I haven't set this configuration up. So I'm going to set this up, add some settings, hit save, and then now I'll just get just a confirmation saying that all the settings that I have here will apply to all my projects within this group. And I'm just pretending that I have 100 projects that are underneath this group. All right, I'll hit save. Again, I'll just see the regular toast success message saying that it's been applied, and that's done. So now kind of where it gets a little bit more interesting is maybe editing. Actually, not the editing part, but the flow after this one can get a little Yeah, ambiguous. But anyways, so this is editing an integration that already has inherited some values. So in this case, I'm again the owner of this group called front end group, and the admin of this instance has already set up a Jira integration, and they want everyone within that instance to inherit settings. So I see now if I go to this integrations menu, I see that there's already Jira set up. So if I go there, I'll see that again, this integration is managed by my administrator. And I see that there's already settings filled out here. Again, like, so same behavior, same pattern. I was thinking that at the project level, if I wanted to overwrite this, you know, I could go ahead and overwrite it, and I would just type in my username and my password, front end group, and whatever my password is, for example. And then I also, again, see this button where I could restore the restore to the administrator settings, and again, I have this table. So a similar pattern here. I could just do the same thing, save it, and then again, same pattern, right? So here's where it kind of gets interesting is, let's say at the group level now, I am, let me just go here first. Okay, so this is at the group level, I'm editing an integration that already has some settings and has projects that override those settings. So again, like, so I'm in at the group level here, and I go to my integrations, and again, so just to slow down a little bit, so I'm the owner of the group, and I have my admin settings that are being inherited down. But then also at this group level, I have 3 projects that have been already overriding these settings, these settings within my group. So you could see here, I'll be able to see that this Django APIs doc project and these other help docs projects are overriding my group settings here, which happen to be trickled down from the instance level settings. So again, if I wanted to change these settings and I want to have these settings be overridden, I could do that. I could add this, and then I could hit save. And then now I have the option within, by hitting save, I could either apply these settings that I just added just to the settings that have, just for the settings that are not new. Is that right? And then, or I could force all the projects to be in sync with all the settings again. So I'm just gonna leave it. So, because I basically want to leave those projects alone, because I feel like that project owner probably has a good reason to have those settings overridden. So in this case, I'm just gonna leave them and hit save. And then I could see that I'm overriding the admin settings or the instance level settings, but I'm still keeping my settings, and then these project owners are still keeping their settings, and that's also a case. So this is a little bit of a kind of a interesting scenario where you're kind of overriding the admin level settings, and I could also have the child projects overriding my group level settings, and they could be overriding the instance level settings. So yeah, I'd love everyone's feedback on this kind of, I feel like this is the screen that could be a little bit confusing the most at this group level. So once you're going through the Figma prototype screen, yeah, I'd love to get some feedback here. So any questions on this before I keep going? I know it's a lot to kind of go through. Sorry.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. So, so at this stage, the admin has some settings. Mm-hmm. And at the group level, you're overriding some settings, right?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know as a user which settings have I overridden? Like, is this yellow state supposed to stay there to show me that these are the fields that I've changed, or?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Is there something?
Yeah, that was the idea. Yeah, there.
Okay. Okay.
One question there. This table at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Is it navigatable, so that, for example, I would say, hey, you know, this overwrites something. Let me just quickly jump into it to see what it overwrites.
Yes, those would be links to that project directly. So then you could go
Got it.
exactly, and it would actually link exactly to the same settings page where you could see, oh, okay, this is what's being overridden, and then I could just change it, and then I could actually hit this button for that project
Yeah.
owner, and then it would restore it. Yeah.
Okay. And one question, sorry, I probably could have asked it earlier. It doesn't really fit to this this workflow that you just showed, but just in general, we've talking a lot about Jira, and this may be more for the engineers. If we implement this, do we have to implement it for every integration that we currently have, or is it basically like the implementation-wise a quick win, and everything that's now a service template will automatically be an integration?
Yeah, it's a good question, Lucas. Don't know, maybe more question again for Andy and Justin. But yeah.
Maybe if Andy wants to chip in, but my understanding is that we'll get a quick win for every sort of integration, not just Jira. So it's supposed to work for everything. Although from some of my testing, some specific integrations, basically they cannot really work at the like instance or group level. Some very limited ones.
Okay, this was just a general question because we were always talking about Jiras. If we go into the nitty-gritty details, and I could imagine that some certain integration behaves differently because of reasons. Yeah, but I just had to fear that we have to go through a similar work, you know, obviously a bit easier, but we have to go and implement all the forms for every integration. But yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
For the front end itself, I'm not 100% sure like how complicated this kind of flow will be. So we might need some specific changes for some forms, especially if you want to have like the whole functionality of like, you know, like keeping it on the same page, because right now it's all hammer views, which means like we will need like refreshes on every kind of action, pretty much on your save, on your restore. You might need some refreshes too. So it's not ideal at the moment.
Gotcha. Thanks, Justin. And I just want to also be clear that this is kind of my second pass at this. So the more I've been kind of doing this, I would love to kind of get some other like user validation on this. So I don't want anyone to feel like this is the final UI for this. So this is just one way of kind of doing this, of showing the user that which settings are overridden. So I have a couple ideas of other variations on this of how this could work. So I wanted to kind of maybe create a separate issue and just test those out, and maybe also just run those with run those designed by the larger UX group to see what their thoughts are on just kind of this specific pattern of how, you know, settings are being overwritten. So yeah, I'll let everyone know once this is more final.
One of the things that popped to my mind is if I'm thinking not necessarily about a Jira integration, but for example, for a Slack integration, one thing that I could imagine is that let's say you have different Slack channels you want to send something to, that on a group level, you might want to create this as presets, right? Hey, I have these 5 presets to send to these channels. And maybe, but that sounds like further down the road, you know, something that basically instead of just one, you might have multiple that you could choose from, for example, right? These kind of things. But yeah, this is just like me getting ahead of the game here.
That's a good point. One of the things we had talked about in regards to the Slack integration, because you're right, like the Slack integration, you probably want to specify the channel each time, right? That's not necessarily true of all integrations, right? Like Jira, because it integrates at the instance level, is not that way. But anyway, one of the things that had been discussed was possibly allowing the instance or group level integration to be saved as not active and with fields missing, right? So you could set up the entire Slack integration except for the channel and then not set it as active. And then what that allows is all of those other pieces of information can flow out to everywhere, and then they can set up the channel instantly, right? They just go in there, hit active, type in the channel name, and it's set. So it's one way to approach that problem, but I don't know if that is if that's something we want to do right off the bat, or we want to turn that into like a follow-up.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, as I'm new, as I said, I will probably ask like a lot of things, and maybe things that have already been discussed, because reading up with all the issues and epics is very time consuming. Yeah.
No, all good. Yeah, it's always good to re-ask. Yeah, I feel like everyone will learn something again. So, yeah, that's a good point, Patrick, about that user story there. I should add that one as well. About kind of like, because what we're saying here is a lot of these settings from the administrator, they're recommended, right? So in some cases they're mandatory, in some cases they're recommended. So, so yeah, I can make a user or a flow for that scenario where, you know, we kind of purpose intentionally as the admin leave them blank, some of them, and have the reasoning why there. So one last one, if you all are still into this and not bored yet.
Could you just ask one more question? Or
yeah, sure.
Could you just try to complicate this even more? Are we going to support like subgroups? So you have like admin, right? Like admin, then that inherits to groups.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you have like subgroup.
Yep.
And the subgroup will have something like, I don't know, it will probably have to say you're inheriting both from admin and the group,
mm-hmm.
right? Or
yeah, exactly, Justin. That's why I was thinking. I was hoping that this pattern would scale across even the subgroups. So everything should be the same. You might just see different copies somewhere saying like, this project overrides, you know, or I'm sorry, like somewhere here I said, I don't know where it was, but yeah, maybe we would just change the copy saying like what the scope of that actual state you're in is, you know, like if it's a subgroup, if it's inheriting from a group, or it's going to be changing all projects under this subgroup, for example. So ideally,
okay.
I was hoping that this pattern would scale across those. I haven't done a mock-up for a subgroup yet, or a flow through that, just to see if I was right, you know, or if it will scale. So, but my thoughts are that I think it scales right now, but we'll see.
Yeah, because also I think you might need to add like a small table on this page,
mm-hmm.
because like if you're updating the group,
mm-hmm.
it might want to ask you like, do you want to update the subgroups as well, right?
Oh, here, like within this table, you mean, Justin?
Yeah, and obviously they're not project overrides, like they're subgroup overrides, right? Because
yeah, so actually,
like, you have a group, you have a subgroup that defines something else, and then you have the projects.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So let me I do have a kind of case for that here. So that kind of moves me on to the instance level here. So let's say at the instance level, I am the admin of my entire GitLab instance here. And I show, I think, a case there for that. Actually, I'm sorry, that's in this one here. The editing of one of these, so sorry. All right, let me start at the beginning here. So yeah, again, quick context, I'm the admin of the instance level, and I already set up Jira within my integrations here. And then I see with, like, to answer your question, Justin, I could see that, you know, all the projects, again, that are being overwritten. And this is the idea of the kind of most MVC kind of version of this table, is just listing them all out, and you could click to them. Ideally, maybe we have like a way to like filter this table, like show me only all the groups that are overriding, you know, these settings, or something like that, or other ways to kind of parse this table out. But right now I'm just using this convention where you have like the slash convention. I see that we use that somewhere else within the app, so you could see which groups are being overriding, or which projects live within each group that are overriding those settings. And I could see similarly, if you're in a subgroup, you would just have like the extra slash in there, or the extra path. Does that make sense, Justin? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That will work fine. Yeah.
On the other hand, like in the previous screen, you had the restore to admin settings button, right? And if you are on a deeper hierarchy, theoretically, it could be that you don't want to restore to the instance level, but maybe to some subgroup. So if you're actually inheriting from multiple, but this is also way down the road. If you're inheriting from multiple, you could be, hey, I don't want to go back to the instance level or to the GitLab org group. I want to go back to the settings of the front end group. But again, let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Right now, you could only inherit from the nearest parent level, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I could see, that could be interesting. I don't know. I have to think about that one a little bit more, like you're saying, that the user story for that one. So that's where we are now. Does anyone have any other comments? I think, or do you want me to go through this entire flow here for the instance level setup?
Yeah, one more comment. I think it might be easier for the first iteration to not enable like subgroup inheritance for the settings. But I'm not quite sure. But maybe this is something we could do to make smaller iterations, to just say, okay, it can be just in the same group, and then as the next step, at the next parent group inheritance. But I don't know. We have to look into this.
Yeah, we weren't planning on doing subgroups for this release. I'm pretty sure.
One question. Let's imagine you have a project, GitLab org group, subgroup being front-end group, and I have like, let's say GitLab UI or Pyjamas design system as a project. If I now have settings in Pyjamas design system, what you're advocating for, that it just can inherit from the front-end group for now, or from the top level group?
I think from the front end group, so just for the from the closest parent.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. I wonder what's the more interesting use case for companies though, right? If you work like with a lot of subgroups from like we do at GitLab, if it's more interesting to you to say, hey, I want to set settings on the GitLab level, because that's basically the use case probably for like a lot of people using GitLab.com, because companies, they don't have access to the instance level. Or if they, because if you now, instead of managing 1,000 projects, you have to manage 100 groups But again, iteration and my assumptions could be wrong.
I think that's totally fair as far as, I am in full support of if parent groups keeps the iteration smaller, top level groups makes the iteration smaller right off the bat. I think that makes total sense. Totally fair. I'm all in favor of small iteration. But we commonly, to your point, GitLab.com customers who have one parent group for their entire organization, sometimes with tens of thousands of projects. Right, like one of the targets for this particular integration has, I think, 5,000 projects on GitLab.com, all within one group. And then they have, I think it's 18 subgroups inside of that each then also have, that's how they organize everything. And that allows, if everything being in one group allows them tighter control around compliance and security concerns. So yes, I think subgroups is highly important. We're going to have to do it. And I would say if it's a fast follow, I think that's totally fine. So that's also, it's in the same spirit of, I think the bigger win here is always going to be group integration, right? But we discussed a couple iterations back, right? Like if we need to start at instance level and then move to group, I think that's totally fine. Like that's a fine iteration, but keeping in mind that the goal needs to be at the group level explicitly because of that use case, right?
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Any other comments on this? Do we still have time? Does anyone still want to go through the migration of this right now, migration flow? Or should we set up a different meeting for that?
I just want to thank you real quick. Really, really nice seeing this and like using the new UX patterns like Toast and stuff. Really good stuff.
Cool, thanks.
I think it's awesome. I think this is great. Thank you for putting this together. I think my overall feedback, I really like where things are at. To use the design term, like the gestalt of it, like the overall is great. I think that's awesome. I think they're more tactically, I really want to sit down with you and kind of walk through these on a one by one and really dig into it. I think my biggest thing, and you touched on this earlier, I think the biggest thing is really getting all of the UX copy right is going to be vital to getting this right, because there's definitely a bunch of there are a bunch of cases here where we've got copy that's not like really perfectly tuned, and I'm afraid of confusing people. Other than that, though, I feel like all of the bones are here, right? Like we've got all of the big moving parts, and now it's down to things like IP had a great point, right? Like making the table navigable and like making sure we can kind of quickly move around the interface, things like that. It's really, we've got the 80-20 of it, right? Like we've got the 80 down. Let's go get that last 20% and really get all of these things buttoned up well. And I think this is great. This is going to be awesome. So. I'm gonna schedule some time to follow up with you to let's do like a deep dive on these and really walk through each one side by side. We can try. I'm really curious. I haven't tried out the Figma multiplayer stuff yet, so let's try out like Figma and like let's get in there and like do some work on this. But I think this is awesome. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I definitely think like you mentioned, Patrick, the copy is super important, especially like when I was going through the flow of the migration, that could be very scary. Like like what's going to happen now. So getting that just right is going to be very important. Yeah, especially there. So yeah, but
yeah, and I think like especially the copy, I mean, not to like, pick nits right now, right? Like, but I think again, bones are great, but it's things like how we're talking about when you save the settings, do they apply to things or do they, reset, override, things like that, right? Like, let's make sure that copy is really explicit. I think there are a few opportunities where we may actually want more descriptive copy, right? Like on that particular, that dialogue, right? Like to better explain, like, this is why I'm asking you this question in this context, and this is why you need to respond. I think things like that are going to be important. But again, I don't think any of that stops engineering. Like all of this stuff is going to be like small tweaks to the UI, not like functional tweaks. So I think, again, awesome, great work. This is awesome because it gives everybody a place to kind of work from, and then we can kind of tighten everything down over time.
All right, great. Yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for sticking through this. And after this call, I'm going to update the end-to-end issue mockup, and I'll just ping everyone in the ecosystem channel when it's ready, or just ping you in the issue, saying if you want to leave feedback. I'll put a little bit more instructions on how to leave feedback within that issue then. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you all. And yeah, looking forward to getting this one released into the wild soon.
Thanks a lot. It's great.
Thanks,
All right.
Libor.
Talk to
Good
you
luck.
soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Libor.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.